welcome to our webinar, PNR 11.1, Why You Need the New Version. We're glad you could join us today. My name is Eden, and I'm on the marketing team here at Sunset Learning. And with me, I have Bob Elliott, who will be presenting today. Bob is a senior instructor for Versatile Technology Services. Working with the company for more than 22 years, he focuses mainly on customers in the service provider industry. His expertise includes data center builds, system administration, network administration, device provisioning, virtualization, and training. Thank you for being here with us today, Bob, and I'll hand it off to you.
Thank you, Eden. Thanks for the introduction. Yes, my name is Bob Elliott, and as Eden said, I've been working with these products for quite a while. Many versions going back over probably 18 years or so. So there is some new and exciting stuff in version 11 and 11.1, and that's what we're going to be talking about today. We're not going to be talking about all of the new features. There's a lot of details, but we're going to hit some of the high-level features and help you decide if you should stay with your current environment, or if moving on and upgrading to this newest version is going to be more appropriate for your environment. So what we're going to talk about here is the operating environments for PNR 11. They have changed. There's now some unsupported versions and some newly supported versions. We'll talk about some of the updates in the product in version 10 and 11. We'll talk about some of the new features specifically in DHCP, Authoritative DNS, and the caching DNS servers. And there's been a lot of information published recently on some of the products and how to use them. So I will show you some of those white pages and point you to the landing page so that you can bookmark that and keep an eye out for any future publications that may come out. So what we're not really going to talk about today is how to upgrade or how to migrate, or step-by-step details. And I'm not really going to tell you which version to use. I'm going to talk about some of the newer features in version 11, but like I said, it's up to you to decide what's best for your environment. So version 11 has been out for about a year, and 11.1.0.1 was released within the last month. So that's kind of what I'm going to focus on, is that particular version, 11.1.0.1, which is the newest. And that has been tested on the following operating systems. And these are the newest revisions that were tested. So the newest Red Hat was 8.4. The newest version of CentOS was also 8.4. The Docker image that was tested was built with Red Hat UBI 8.4. It was tested on VMware 7. The update was 2D, and also on OpenStack Xena. Keep in mind that Windows is not going to be supported after PNR 10.1. So if you're running CNR on Windows, if you're running PNR, Prime Network Registrar on a Windows server, you will have to migrate that to another operating environment when you do upgrade to version 11. And as we know, a lot of customers had been running PNR on CentOS, and there's going to be some changes coming out with that. Customers currently still can run PNR on CentOS 7 and CentOS 8, but looking down the road in the future, support for CentOS is going to be going away. And if you are using CentOS and you don't wish to do any major OS migrations, you may consider migrating over to Red Hat instead. So what happened with CentOS is It was originally an OS that was mostly a mirror of Red Hat, but they have changed it so now it will be um, the current version of CentOS is going to be a future release or a future candidate release for Red Hat. So they're now going to use CentOS for research and development, make an improvement or add a feature and put it in CentOS, have it tested, and then if it's successful, it'll get deployed to Red Hat. So keep in mind there are a lot of changes in that roadmap. So if you guys do have your deployment running on CentOS, just consider this roadmap. So PNR 11.1.01 is available for download now. It's been released for about 3 weeks now. And on these next 3 pages, I have all of the different OSs or different supported files that you can download, and they're listed here. So we see that there are a couple. There's a signature file for Kubernetes. And the third one down the list is the client RPM for Linux 7. The next one is a client RPM for Linux 8. And the fourth one on the list is a local RPM for Linux 7. And the final one on the list, on this page anyway, is for the local RPM. So that's different. That's new. Anybody that has been working with a product for a long time is probably going to notice that they didn't have these client RPMs and local RPMs previously. What used to happen was you would start your installation, and then during the installation, it would ask you which components you wanted to install, and it would install those accordingly. Now the installation package has been broken down. There's a client RPM and there's a local RPM. The client RPM is the NRCMD. So if you wanted to run the command line interface from a server that's not a CNR server or a PNR server, if you just wanted to install it on a Linux 8 server and have NRCMD run from that server, in that case, you would want to install the Cisco Prime Network Registrar 11.1.0.1 client RPM for Linux 8. The other ones listed, the local RPMs are for the provisioning servers. So DHCP server or DNS server or TFTP server. That's what those local RPMs are for. And I'm going to go to the next slide, which is a continuation of this same list. So on the next slide, we see that other things are available for download. It would be a local Docker container and a signature for a Docker file, and then a regional RPM for Linux 7 and a regional RPM for Linux 8, and then an additional Docker container. So this is another thing that's new. Now, if you want to install the regional server, you have to download the appropriate RPM file. It may be a Linux 7, it may be Linux 8, it may be a Docker container. But you would make that selection when you do the download. So the installation procedure has changed. Historically, it would ask you if you were installing the client, or it would ask you if you were installing a local server or a regional server, and you would make that selection. Where now in version 11, you have to download the proper file for the proper server that you're going to be installing. And this is so I've just gone on to the next slide, slide 3 of 3, which is the final page of all the options of the files that you can download for 11.1.0.1. And there is a regional Docker container. And then there's also documentation. So keep that in mind if you're going to be downloading this. You want to make sure that you get the proper OS and the proper server type, whether it's a regional or local or a client. So some of the updates, and these updates are going to be not just specific for version 11, but some of these are going to be going back to version 10 as well. So in version 10, they introduced smart licensing, and that's also available in version 11. Keep in mind that there is a separate license for 10 and 11 and also 9. So if you're upgrading from 9 to 11, make sure you have the license for version 11. If you're currently on version 10 and you're going to be upgrading to version 11, make sure that you have access to that license before you start testing your upgrade. And there is also Docker container support, and that actually got introduced in version 10.1. So back in version 10, they introduced offering the software as a Docker container. Other recent enhancements are alternate views and installation and upgrade updates. So I'll talk about that in a little more detail. Now when you install it, you add a package. In previous versions, there was a script, install underscore CNR .sh, and when you ran that script, it would prompt you and ask you a few questions, mostly file locations and things like that. And then once it got all of the responses, it would then run the package add command. The script would do that. In version 11, it's different. You actually have to run the package add command yourself. You do lose some flexibility. So some of the things that it did ask you before, like where do you want your data files put, or where do you want your executable files put, and where do you want your log files put on the file system, you no longer have the option of selecting the directory where they go. Now, when you run the rpm-i to install the package, it's going to automatically create default locations and put those files there. So that's definitely something that you want to take note of. If you are accustomed to running CNR and installing CNR, and it's kind of been the same for a few versions, you may be surprised when you get to version 11 and you see a lot of the stuff that's been the same way regarding the installation is now different. In some cases it's easier, but in some cases you may lose a little flexibility. So definitely you're going to want to test the procedure and make sure that the new installation is still going to work within your desired environment. So other updates, certificate management for security. The Oracle Berkeley database has been upgraded. There's been a lot of CLI enhancements, command line interface enhancements. So in version 10 and 11, there's been a lot related to audit. It helps you automate NRCMD commands like high availability server synchronization and things like that have been added. So if you find that you're using an older version, maybe you're using PNR 9, for example, and there may be some things missing from the command line interface that you may wish to automate, but you can't. Maybe the command isn't available. You have to manually open up the web UI and navigate through the web pages. to perform the task that you want to accomplish. Check and see if the enhancements in version 10 and 11 may have improved that area. You may be able to use the command line interface now. And with that, of course, you can script it and you can set it up so that jobs run automatically rather than always having to use the web UI and always having to manually make changes. There's been a lot of improvements with Swagger support for the REST APIs, and that's mostly for developers. I'm more of a systems administrator. I don't do a lot of Java development, or I don't work a lot with the APIs. But I do know that in versions 10 and 11, they've greatly enhanced both Swagger support and the REST API capabilities. So consider that using the REST API as a way to perform administration on your server without using the normal interfaces. So some of the specific updates for DHCP in versions 10, 11. There have been some enhancements for relay health check. There's also, as I mentioned, there's been a lot of command line interface enhancements. A lot of them for synchronization, where now you can perform a failover sync, and you can use a command line interface for that. But there's both DNS, DHCP do have much better NRCMD capabilities now. Version 11 also has a high availability smart sync, and that is for DHCP high availability, and it just reduces the amount of network traffic and the synchronization frequency. So, as I mentioned, there have been improvements in the DHCP relay health check. This was a feature that was initially introduced in version 9 of PNR, but it's an enhancement to failover. If you're using failover and you're using a load balanced environment, you can enable relay health check. And that will allow the CNR server to determine if a CMTS has a bad interface. And if there's any network problems or routing problems. So say, for example, you have a DHCP failover pair, and they may be able to communicate with each other, okay? But say there's a network breakage between one of the DHCP servers and its CMTS. With DHCP failover and a load balancing environment, if that were to occur, devices from that CMTS may not get their IP address. With relay health check, the failover pair can monitor that, and it can detect an outage between the other server and one of the CMTSs, and then the good server can respond on behalf of the bad server. So again, this is it's an enhancement to DHCP failover. It does require that load balancing is enabled and in use. And if there's a network breakage between one of the two DHCP servers and a CMTS, the other DHCP server will respond on behalf of the broken DHCP server. So It was introduced in PNR version 9, so it's been in the product for 3 or 4 years now. There have been some enhancements in version 11.0.1 and 11.1, and basically they they allowed relay health check to be used in different networking environments. It was kind of rigid how they could be used before, and depending how your DHCP environment was set up, uh, relay health check may not have been an option, um, both for V4 and for DHCP V6. But with version 11, they have enhanced that. So now for IPv4, it does support configurations that use GI adder as the server ID. So um, uh, historically, it would use the main DHCP server would be the server ID. Some customers have had their network configurations set up to use the GI adder as the server ID. And now with the latest version of PNR, that is supported, and you can use relay health check. And with IPv6, now PNR 11 supports configurations with cascaded relays in IPv6. So it's common in IPv6 to have many relays. A router will relay to another router, and that router will relay, and then that router will relay. That's considered cascading relays. And now with PNR 11, you can configure relay health check if your network is configured that way. So there are more DHCP enhancements. Those are some of the main ones that I talked about. I'll talk about DNS a little bit now. There's now support for DNS Anycast. With DNS Anycast, say you had a worldwide deployment. You may have DNS servers deployed all over the world. They may have all kinds of IP addresses. With Anycast, you would give all your clients the same IP address for the DNS server. And even though you may have, 10 different DNS servers out there running, and so each client would get the same, there may be 1 or 2 IP addresses for the DNS server. And those clients would, when they go to send requests to the DNS server, there's going to be some routing mechanism that occurs to route them to the most appropriate DNS server. So, for example, if you had somebody from a client from Japan, they would hopefully use a DNS server that was in Japan or somewhere very close on their network, rather than having it be directed to a different DNS server that was many networks away or across the world. So um, now with PNR 11, it does support DNS Anycast. Another thing that is supported is DNS over TLS or DOT. And that is supported for both caching DNS and authoritative DNS. What DNS over TLS is it's essentially encrypted DNS. There's another layer added at the transport layer. It encrypts it, and it does use different ports. It doesn't use port 53. Now, historically, any DHCP traffic was sent over the wire in plain text to port 53. It was very easy to snoop it or to see what customers were where they were going or what what they were resolving. But now with DNS over TLS, the traffic is going to be encrypted, and nobody in between is going to be able to snoop that. And again, there are a lot of command line interface enhancements now in versions 10 and 11. So if you're using an older version and using DNS and using a lot of manual procedures to add records or do maintenance, look into version 10 and 11. Look into the command line interface. See if you may have some enhancements that may help you automate some of the tasks that you do all the time. There is a DNS firewall. I'm not 100% sure which version this was introduced into the PNR product, but there is a DNS firewall which can be helpful for both authoritative DNS and caching DNS servers. So here's a little more information on DNS over TLS. It is supported on both the authoritative DNS servers as well as the PNR DNS caching server. At the cache, it can be configured separately for incoming client requests or for outgoing DNS server requests. So, and I think there's going to be more and more of this. There's a big push for DOT or DNS over TLS. Google is pushing it. Microsoft is pushing it. You can now, if you run, if your OS is Windows 11, you can go in and configure DNS to use DOT or DNS over TLS. And here's just a little more information about the DNS Anycast. The purpose is it enables high resiliency for DNS by removing a single point of failure. You're now going to have many DNS servers, and they're going to have one logical IP address or one or two IP addresses for all the DNS servers. And you have to use the Quagga routing utility to determine which DNS server will be used, and that routing utility has to be actually configured on the DNS server. And this Quagga uses BGP, which is Border Gateway Protocol, I believe, which is basically the protocol for all the main internet routers. So again, DNS Anycast allows allows clients worldwide to use the same IP addresses for the DNS servers, but when those clients actually send queries to the DNS server, some kind of routing mechanism happens to route them to a DNS server that's very close to them on the network. And I think I've already talked about most of the caching DNS updates in 10.11. But essentially you get better security and better performance as well. There's a lot of customers that use caching DNS. There's a lot of wireless customers, and they've requested higher and better performance for the DNS queries, and the newer versions of PNR do support that. Another enhancement for the DNS server is a smart cache. So essentially, when a DNS server sends a query and gets an answer back, there's a TTL field, which is a time to live, called time to live, which is basically how long is this information valid. Smart cache allows, so sometimes a DNS server may not be available. There may be an outage, maybe some kind of network issue in between, or it could be a number of problems. And with Smart Cache, your caching DNS server will keep the last best information that it has. So, for example, if the time to live has expired for a domain name that it's looking up, and it attempts to look up that domain name again, and there's a failure, it will use the last best known answer to attempt to refresh the cache. So that's another enhancement for DNS. So overall, here's some of the features for PNR 11. DHCP, it's highly scalable, can serve millions of devices. It's interoperable. It supports v4, v6, dynamic DNS, DHCP safe failover for both v4 and v6, and DHCP failover load balancing with relay health check. As far as address management, there are a lot of PNR dashboards. They give you full visibility of the assigned addresses, and new releases are shared with BT Diamond to test with their IPAM. As far as the authoritative DNS, it's fully functional, supports v4, v6. It does support zone distributions to other DH or other DNS implementations, not just Cisco. It can do a zone distribution to a non-Cisco implementation. Supports high availability, host health checks, DNS Anycast, and it is secure. And again, that's some of the updates in version 10 and 11 is to make DNS more secure, both with DOT and DNS over HTTPS. And with the firewalling, you can now blacklist. As far as caching, reduces latency, increases the scale. It is robust. It performs highly, and it's very interoperable. It is secure. It's secure against cache poisoning. It does offer DNS firewall. There's recursive DNS security, and DOT from a client and or to authoritative DNS, and it can protect from amplification attacks. And I would like to point out there's the BU has published some really good information, some additional information, and some white pages. There's some about how to secure DNS, and there's some related to caching. So as part of this presentation, I will go to the site and show you some of those white pages. I think I'll probably wait to the end to do that. But this is you will want to write this down. I would suggest writing this down. The product landing page, https:// www.cisco.com/go/PNR. And I will show you that site, but I would recommend writing it down. They do add new white papers and new publications there periodically. And generally, when they do, it's the latest version and some of the latest things that customers are doing. So another thing to consider is, with containerization is now that PNR supports containerization, you can really rethink the way you do some of the stuff. Like failover servers, for example. With containerization, it could be a replacement for failover. Instead of having, a backup server that's always running, another option may be to be able to deploy a container as sort of a hot standby. So, and the same thing with DNS with containerization. It now makes it easier to deploy new servers, and so if you reach your limit on and wish to deploy a new server now with PNR 11 and Docker containerization, it's much easier to do that. Uh, so the goal of this tech talk was talk about some of the operating systems and some of the environments now with Kubernetes and Docker and containerizations. Talk a little bit about the DHCP features, specifically Relay Health Check, and we talked about some of the DNS features. And I will point you to the documentation. So, let's see. I'm gonna stop sharing just for a second.
Hey, Bob, I think you're muted. We can't hear you right now.
Okay, thanks. I'm not sure how that happened, but here is the document I've opened is the securing PNR DNS white paper, and it'll talk about protection against cache poisoning, DDoS attacks, malware, data exfiltration, and undesirable content. Some of the other white pages: tracking IP usage with the regional server, and tracking renewal activity. If you're in an environment where you want to do more with the address spacing, but you're not quite sure how to do it or how to get it or how to get the information, consider this white paper. This will help you uh, configure your regional server to get valuable information regarding the address spacing. So hopefully I piqued your interest a little bit in PNR 11. Do keep in mind there's new licensing required. So even if you're on 10 and you want to test out 11, you will have to get a new license to test that out. But hopefully uh, I've generated a little interest and you want to check out the newer version, I know there's a lot of dependencies. It's dependent on the OS, and there's a lot of moving parts. So even if you may wish to deploy PNR 11 immediately, it may take a while. But either way, hopefully some of this information was valuable. We do offer additional training. We offer a 4-day class, which covers PNR and both DHCP and DNS. There's a 5-day combo class, which is CPNR and back or prime cable provisioning. And we currently have in development a 2-day class for Cisco Prime Access Registrar. And we also do customized classes for if somebody has a particular version or a particular learning desire. If you are interested in any further training, here's some contact information. And I think for now, that's all I have on the why you need PNR 11. Hopefully, I've given you some good reasons. DHCP health relay check and DNS security, containerization. Hopefully, you're interested in some of those. So.
If you like this video, don't forget to subscribe and click on the notification icon to get notified whenever we upload new content.